Welcome once again to the Think Fitness Life podcast. This is our 13th installment. We'll be going over the bench press today. And as usual, we have the same crew here, myself, Matt Gluckman, and then we have Mike Urso and Eric Menchie. I'm happy to have these guys with me because they are brilliant. They are a wealth of knowledge, and I'm merely just a jack of all trades, master of none. So we're going to hop right into it because we got a lot to go over. A couple announcements were it's kind of both circled around stem cell research. One of them is a sort of a newer treatment for joint issues, osteoarthritis, which affects a lot of adults in America. But so essentially what they do is they will take your own stem cells and put it in a device to spin it and separate, blood platelets and stuff like that. And they re-inject it into your body to help speed up the your body's own natural healing process. And the really big benefit of this is you don't have to have treatments that involve, pain medicines or physical therapy or cortisone injections or surgeries. It's basically just kind of throwing gas onto the flame, so to speak, for your own body's natural repair systems. So, have you guys heard of this at all?
Not
this procedure at all?
using like what sounds like a centrifuge, like where they spin something around really rapidly, and I don't know what separate what they're.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
I haven't heard of that. I've heard of the stem cells. Joe Rogan talks a lot about it on his podcast. He had it done in his shoulder with very good results. But yeah, no, I have not heard of that specific procedure.
Yeah. So like you said, with the centrifuge, they're literally doing it to isolate the stem cells and create like a really, really rich concentration. Sure. And then they do it like the same day, like within a matter of minutes, they'll inject it right back into the patient, whatever damaged joint they may have, to help kind of boost the healing process. So I thought that was pretty fascinating. The stem cell therapy has been around since like 2012, and these platelet rich plasma therapies, I guess you'd call it, have been incorporated in the past 8 or so years. So they're getting better and better. Modern medicine really does prove to have a lot of benefits as well. I know we always talk bad about medicine or medical doctors or whatever. You can fix it on your own. But there is.
I heard recently, a lot of people end up having like degradation or a degeneration of a joint, like need a hip replacement or a knee replacement, for example. Well, what they're saying is like the technology is just going so rapidly right now that if you could just wait like a little bit longer and hold out to get your replacement done, that there may be a technology or a methodology that'll be able to fix it without having to go through like a painful surgery and rehabilitation process and all that a whole replacement would have to do, which is pretty incredible when you think about it. To potentially be able to regenerate tissue like that without ever having to get a replacement.
Yeah, exactly. Like fix it permanently, because most knees and hips last about 15, 20 years before you got to get it replaced again. It's almost hilarious.
I don't even think it's that long.
Then again, most people who are really,
I heard like 8 or 9 is like a good average. Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah, nobody wants that. If you have to get a total knee replacement or a total hip replacement, you want to do that again in 10 years. But so kind of along with that, the whole stem cell thing was just a week ago. MIT came out with a study that basically they were studying fasting in different periods, and they were measuring stem cells as well as metabolism. And in conclusion, they showed that 24-hour fasting periods, we talked about this last week in the autoimmune episode, that fasting has a lot of benefits, but 24-hour fasting periods, right, specifically, will regenerate your body's own stem cells as well as double your metabolism.
So here's my thoughts on that. When you mentioned this to me earlier, I was thinking about that, and I was like, one of the things that I think is pretty fascinating is obviously our ability to heal ourselves. And if anyone's into like comic books and the whole Wolverine thing, where exactly, I think of him like, and I look at my kids, right, and their ability to like regenerate, like when they get a cut on their arm or something, like it heals in literally 2 days. And like if I get a cut, it's going to be like at least like a couple weeks before it's gone. But I think like
you're not 21
but
anymore.
Something we talked about actually a couple weeks ago, which was like the digestive process as well as the brain and how much energy is required from the body to be able to go through the digestive process. So when you're constantly eating food, how much energy is required for your body to be used for that whole digestive process. When you're not eating and you're fasting, think about how much that energy and those resources that would be used for digestion will now go to other areas of the body, like cell turnover and regeneration of tissues and regeneration of cells. So it makes total sense to me that that can absolutely take place with somebody who's in a let's say like a 24-hour prolonged fasting state.
Absolutely, and it's so funny you brought that up. Like, I thought Menchie was the segue master because the study at MIT showed that the specific stem cells were in the intestine and they were in the gut, and specifically intestinal stem cells to power obviously the intestine. So normally as people get older, this intestine usually slows down and people gain weight. So yeah, it goes right along with what you're kind of saying.
80% of our immune system is located in the gut.
Yep.
That says everything right there.
So like literally by giving your digestive system, / immune system, by giving it a 24-hour period of not having to work, you're like basically you're like, here, have the weekend off, have a Sunday. You're not even giving them a
when
weekend.
You go on vacation, how much more refreshed you are and regenerated. It makes total sense. Our gut needs that too.
Exactly, and we don't give it to we throw stuff at it to work.
Eat every 2 hours. It's going to keep your metabolism fired up.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I just haven't had that experience.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Like there's just such a huge benefit to fasting, and I hope everybody who listens to this podcast looks into it a little bit more. And if you don't know where to start, you can just Google The Complete Guide to Fasting by Jason Fung and Jimmy Moore. That's a really good one.
Precision Nutrition.
I don't know if you guys have
Nutrition has some really great stuff out on it. John Berardi actually went through a lot of self-experimentation with it.
Definitely check out fasting, people. It's a really beneficial tool that is overlooked. But yeah, let's move on into
the bench press.
Open discussion. That's right. Drum roll, please.
Is it Monday? It is not Monday. But
it's Thursday.
National Bench Day.
Means that everyone's doing arms tomorrow because it's Friday. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah, the bench press. I mean, I don't even know where to begin. Because
overabused.
It is probably the most commonly performed exercise in the gym. Whether it's a dumbbell bench press or a barbell bench press, I feel like that's everyone's go-to exercise if they walk into the gym and they don't know what they want to do.
3x10 with 135, game over, game set match. I did my job for the day. That's literally it.
Okay, so the bench press is obviously a pressing motion. You're flat, you're horizontal, and you're pressing the weight vertical. So all that tension is put on your pectorials, your triceps, your core should be engaged. You should even feel your back
Lats.
working because that's like your foundation. Yeah, you should feel your lats working because that's your foundation for every pressing motion. But who is it most beneficial for? I got to ask you guys that because I don't really like to bench. I don't bench that
NFL
often. I'll be
lineman.
honest.
I'm gonna say.
All
Yeah,
right.
that's what I would have said.
Yeah, and then
Okay.
anybody
Number
who's
one.
trying to break a world record, or look, for me, it's not for me the most functional exercise that you can do.
I
I mean, you've
completely
got a
agree.
guy who's like 250 pounds who could bench press 300, but then you put him on the ground and he can't do 30 push-ups, right? What does that tell you? What's the carryover there? So it's kind of a love-hate relationship with me with the bench press. Whereas, I mean, it just feels good to lock your back up against a flat platform and just press weight as hard as and as far away from you as possible, and feel the pump in your chest. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing with it is like it's an exercise that you actually can feel working very specific muscles. And so that's probably why a lot of people gravitate towards it, is because you can feel your chest working, you can feel your arms working. If you're doing it, somewhat wrong, you can feel your shoulders working too. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things going on there. And I think that, people just, they're your mirror muscles. When your chest is popping and, your triceps look good, um, that's what people are going for. So, yeah, I mean, the bench press is that kind of go-to exercise that we see, as we said, Monday mornings, or Monday afternoon. It's that first exercise that people go. They throw a 45-pound plate on each side. They don't warm up. They just start repping it out. They do their 3 sets of 10. Wash the hands, and then boom, on to the next thing. Let's go to incline press, then let's go to decline press, and let's just crush volume. Let's not phase. Let's just crush volume, for the next like infinity and beyond. Rant over.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I did that in college.
Oh, we
I
all did.
definitely
Yeah, we
was.
all did.
Who
I
didn't?
I have my chest day where we have to
Oh yeah.
do flat barbell and then incline dumbbell and then decline dumbbell and cable flies down, cable flies up, pec deck, like. And you're so right about the visual part. But I feel like more so, less of it is about seeing it in the mirror, and more of it is like being able to like visually see your arms moving and your chest working, and you get that like instant feedback of what you're doing to what's working. Whereas like all back exercises and hinging patterns as well, people can't see themselves, they can't see their form, they can't see everything working, they can't see the contraction, so it's less of a, I don't know, less of a reward, I guess, less
Yeah.
enjoyment out of it. It requires more mind muscle connection and more focus, and a lot of people just want to be on their
Feel
cell
the pump.
phones or chat with a bunch of friends while
Yeah.
they work out. I don't know.
But I feel that's why chest and biceps and triceps are so popular, because just like Mike said, they can actually feel the pump and they can feel like that strain of the muscles. But then they completely neglect the rest of the body, and it's just, I don't know if it's the one of the easiest of the big lifts to do, or it's simple where the setup is non-threatening unless you have heavy weight on it, that it's just easy for people to do compared to like a deadlift or a row
Yeah, there's a
or a
very
squat.
short learning curve with it, right?
Yeah,
It's like you said, it's like lie on your
yeah.
back, unrack the weight, let it come down to your chest, and press it back up. There's really, I mean, we know it's hard to
It's
mess it up,
hard to
yet
mess it up.
we see it all the time, but also we're movement experts who know what to look for. But there's definitely, most people, I would say, probably do it wrong. I mean, a little bit of good coaching can fix that, and actually to get you to feel it in your triceps and chest and not in your shoulders and grinding away at the front of your shoulder. But I mean, maybe Eric, I mean, as a technician master, maybe you can take us through kind of what the proper setup, as well as what is the proper bench press, how is it executed properly?
I would say there's a couple different ways you can approach the bench. Now there's the off right off the bat, there's the power lift away with like the high arch back, butt staying on the bench, and you're
Awful,
driving up through
awful.
full
I
body.
hate it. I hate it. I hate that way.
But it's just that's more for the powerlifting sport, and it's what they need to do to move
Right.
the most amount of weight for the least amount of distance. Does that work for general population or everyone? I would say no. And that's where I think you see a lot of people go wrong is they try to drive full body into a bench exercise and it just starts looking ugly. So I would say the first off, the setup has to be 5 points of contact, back of your head, butt, your shoulders, and your 2 feet on the ground. And most people, when they start moving weight or they hit fatigue, that butt's coming off. They're driving through the legs. They're trying to get everything they can out of their lower bodies to move this weight. When that ends up affecting the upper body and using more shoulders. And where a lot of people see is when they unrack the bar, that bar should be kind of at your mid chest level. I see a lot of people take that bar off and they're right under their neck. They're at their upper chest area, which if you're done right, you can train the upper pecs that way. But I see that leads to a lot more flared shoulders. Like Mike said, a lot more anterior shoulder issues. You're actually grinding more humerus into socket than anything else rather than working the triceps and the chest. And I don't know what you guys seen bench pressing, but I usually coach it as, try to get those elbows to a 45-degree angle or at least down more rather than
Yeah, same here. I would say
past.
a lot of people, the faults I'm seeing are the arms coming out, almost into a fly position. I think that's where we start to get that really heavy internal rotation in the shoulder. The lats, obviously start to get a little bit more disengaged because you can't really squeeze those armpits nice and tight as you mentioned, Matt, previously, getting that nice stable platform to be able to push from. You got to remember that cannon from a canoe principle, right? And if we lack stability through our scapula and through our lats to really keep that mid upper back engaged, we're not going to have a good stable platform to push from. And what you end up seeing a lot of times is in a proper bench press, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create tension and pull actually down. Like I'm using my back to pull the weight down because it's going to create tension in my back. And then as I drive the bar away back up towards the ceiling, I have so much more of a stable platform to push off of. And I'm really working on not just the concentric phase and letting the bar kind of just come down, and then I'm changing direction with it and just trying to, push against gravity. But now I'm really controlling both phases of the lift, and from there's a much better neurological, connection that's being made. You're going to get so much stronger through both phases of that lift, which I just see a lot of people letting that bar just kind of fly down and then just, throw it up and just focusing on the concentric phase, which I think is a mistake if you're trying to get, stronger.
Yeah, it's so funny that you just said cannon out of a canoe because I said that thing. I said that to like 3 different people today, and then I made an Instagram post about it, and I thought it was hilarious.
I haven't been on Instagram.
You're stalking
today,
me, but I do see exactly what you're saying about like the drop and pray, and I saw it so many times at Equinox where dudes would like load up for a second plate, load up for that third plate, and it's like they've never really done submaximal loads. They've never really built up the strength and the form and the know-how to hit that weight, and they just drop and pray. They just, like you said, they unrack it, they let it come down, and they just pray that they're going to push it up. But if you just get so much more power, if you just stay engaged and control that weight down, you get that stretch reflex before you turn off anything. And one, I think, misstep of the bench press though too is people feeling like in order for it to be a proper bench press, they do one or two things. It's a little double-edged sword. They would do one or two things. They don't come down far enough, and then they come down too low, like they touch their chest. And then what happens is I see a lot of people's shoulders internally rotate. They lose their scapula, and they lose that foundation of their back. And now when they go try to press it up, it's literally from a dead muscle. It's like a deadlift. Like no muscle has that stretch reflex capacity to it. But why don't you go ahead, Mike, and walk someone through how to do like a self-assessment shoulder mobility test on themselves to see if they even should be bench pressing?
Well, so a couple caveats I think with that. For one, let's take I use the functional movement screen, right, for a lot of my mobility and stability assessment.
Yep.
So
Great cook.
the reciprocal shoulder mobility test is something that I will use to basically we have one arm going over the back of the head into flexion and external rotation, and then we have the other arm going behind the back into extension and internal rotation. And what we're trying to do is see if our fists can get within one hand length of each other, or a minimum of 1.5 hand lengths within each other, to basically have a green light to go. The thing that I would say with that is, I see a lot of people that maybe do not have that type of shoulder mobility where they can get those fists close to each other, whether they just lack the ability to separate the shoulders in that reciprocal pattern, or they don't have the proper thoracic extension to be able to get into position to even get into within that 1.5 hands length. So what I would say is, the bench press may be even safer for people who don't have the proper shoulder mobility. I'm not going to go into a vertical press, like, for example, an overhead shoulder press or a military press with somebody.
Right.
What I will do is go into more of a horizontal pressing motion with that person, even though they lack some shoulder mobility. Because if you look at kind of the position of where the shoulder's moving into that horizontal abduction and adduction, it's not really, it's kind of the halfway in between that pattern of me going into full flexion and full extension. So I'm okay with it for the most part. And then also the fact that that person is lying on their back, they don't really have to do a lot of stability like they may, for example, in a standing overhead press, where now I have to stabilize my trunk and my core and move into a position overhead into full flexion where I just know I don't have the goods. So, there's a lot less room for error, I would say, with a movement like the bench press if you do have poor shoulder mobility. That being said, to your point, you should be working on shoulder mobility, because the more we talk about this, like with the, let's say, like the core pendulum theory, which would be, a joint needs to be able to express a full range of motion in order to be able to have the proprioceptive feedback and inputs to be able, for the brain to, be able to be challenged in those different ranges of motion, and be able to have the inputs necessary to add strength, to add stability to that joint and muscle structure. So what I would say is, we still want to work on mobility, because what we're going to end up doing is accessing new ranges of motion. And when we access more range of motion, we build the brain's ability to now be able to have more input into those different joint systems as we're moving through our bench press. So it's safer. It allows you to, be able to load up more weight and have, that ability for the brain to now, be stimulated with more feedback. And you just have more access. It's like taking a window and expanding that window out 2 feet and up 2 feet, and just giving you a lot more air that can breathe through. You know what I mean? And pass through.
Yeah. You're just speaking so fast, like someone's about to rob your house, and you just got to finish this podcast real quick. But I just want to stop real quick and just say, proprioception, for those who might not understand what that is, it's just like the sense of the position that your body is in, your joints are in. So it's literally like mind mapping for your body. And yeah, I mean, that was beautifully spoken. Probably the only thing I wanted to just add real quick was the feedback you're looking out for when you do that shoulder mobility test. So yeah, do it with like a spouse or a friend to have them see if you're about 1.5 hand lengths away from your fist. But if you feel that you are arching your lower back, or you are,
or
your chest is lifting
forward,
up and you're flaring out your ribs to get to, your head's dropping forward, or you're feeling pain on the fronts of your shoulders, a tightness, a pinching, then you should not be benching. You should be getting some soft tissue work. You should be doing some mobility drills. You may even want to do a session or two with your local trainer, because you are going to add insult to injury and possibly get injured. But so you're lacking the right, not only mobility, but your body is somehow compensating for you to get that mobility, which can cause injuries later. Let's talk a little bit about, I think we started to talk a little bit about it but I typically start people up just like on a typical push up, right? Like what would you do like 0 to 60? You know, someone who hasn't lifted in maybe a couple years or ever. How would you progress them to like a flat barbell bench
That's a good
press?
question. I mean, I don't know. I would,
And
yeah.
you can absolutely list like priorities because 100% we can all agree that priorities are like lower body. You know, you got to get that squat pattern down. You got to get that hinge pattern down. You know, everything you do upper body is a foundation from your lower body, and then after
I,
that, you know, you want to be able
I
to
mean,
turn
for
on your
me,
core and
I'm the
control
my
your core
go-to.
through
Like, if I'm going to go to
breathing.
a bench press, there's
That's
really only a couple reasons. Either that person really wants to get good at the bench press and get stronger at the bench press because they just have it in their head that that's what's going to make them feel better or feel accomplished or yeah. Then let's
I
do
feel
it.
like
You
they
know what
got
I
a
mean? I
good
want to give them what
workout.
they
Yeah.
want, and I'll focus on what they need. You know, in other areas. But I'm also I'm also going to focus on and probably put in the bench press if that person's goal is hypertrophy, right? If they want to I just want to build a big chest. I just want to, big arms,
Okay.
nice rounded shoulders. Yeah, then I'm gonna crush the chest in the bench press. It's one of the best ways where we can put the most possible amount of weight on the pec muscle and allow ourselves to just get a lot of volume, a nice full range of motion, and really just pump a lot of blood. Yeah. There's so many
Assisted
different
repetitions. Yeah.
different
Yeah.
approaches you can take with the bench press. So I'm probably going that route. If it's strength, I'm not necessarily. It depends. If I want strength in the pattern, I'm probably not doing that. If I want strength in the chest, and just if I'm looking at specific groups, then yeah, I can absolutely train them. Yeah,
Right. It's like if
yeah,
they were
because
just worried about their
you got to
overall or
think about it.
something,
We're
if they're
going
just worried
back
about their
to,
three lift
if
overall. Yeah.
we're not training a bicep curl, right? We're not training our bicep for strength. We're not training our tricep for strength. If we're just doing like a elbow extension, but because the bench press is a multi-joint movement, because we've got the shoulder moving into adduction and flexion and horizontal adduction, and then we've got the elbow extending. We've got multiple muscles and multiple joints moving. It is still a very good exercise to build strength.
What's your
In
what's your scapula doing?
in
Is it
a
downwardly
bench press,
rotating?
it's
Upwardly
downwardly
rotating?
rotating in the lowering phase. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I would say a lot of people,
Okay. Cool.
there's this
Cool.
misconception, and while we're on the scapula, that the scapula should be moving about the rib cage. Like, so let's just take another horizontal pushing motion, a push up, for example. A lot of people are saying, as I'm lowering down into the push up, I should be squeezing my shoulder blades together, and then as I'm pushing back up, they should be moving apart. Um, if I'm doing a proper push up or a proper any horizontal pushing exercise like a bench press, I don't want my shoulder blades moving at all. The shoulder blades are a floating joint that should be very stable. And if we're following the joint by joint theory that was, obviously coined by Mike Boyle and Gray Cook, well, then the scapula is a stable joint structure. So we have two mobile structures on either side, upstream, downstream. Sorry, I'm going a little fast again, I know. But we got the scapula, which is our stable joint structure. Then upstream of that, we've got the glenohumeral joint, the shoulder, which should be a mobile joint. And then just below that, we've got the thoracic spine, which should be a mobile joint. So that means that right smack in between that scapula should be a stable structure. And if the scapula is maintaining a good stable position, guess what that means? That means that mobile joint, like the shoulder, should be able to move a lot more properly. If we have a mobile or a sloppy scapula, then we may start to feel some issues into the shoulder, into that mobile joint that's supposed to, it's not, we don't want stability there, but we may have to, that shoulder may try to be picking up stability because the scapula is not doing its job. Does that make sense?
Uh-oh. We lose him?
Lost him. Lost him. Yeah. It just dropped. Finish it. Yeah.
Well, I can see what he's saying there with the pushing and the pulling is a lot of times people will pack their scaps and lock them in position and then press through that, which I've seen it and I do it from time to time. And I can also see the other side where people say, okay, get a good reach and let those shoulder blades move up and away. And I think you're I don't know what he was going to say, but I kind of view it as you're kind of training different aspects of a bench press. You're like if you're letting those shoulder blades move, you're getting a good reach away. So you're actually training up that reaching motion rather than if you pack them together, you're just literally just training that pushing.
And it's just kind of all about what you're sort of cognitively focused on too, and like what the focus of the program is that you wrote for it or whatever. You know the rhythm that you're doing it in the trying to be explosive. Are you trying to just keep like your serratus and your core engaged when you press? Like there's so many different applications and benefits to both focuses. But yeah, I'm kind of interested in hearing his point at the end of that too. But I'm sure he'll come back. I'm sure his laptop died or something. But so tell me a little bit about Menchie. Tell me a little bit about like I guess like the athletic application. Like why is it's used in like anytime you see like a football training camp or whatever any athlete's training camp that in the gym, I always see them benching.
Yeah, and you're probably going to see that from now on because it's people often forget and they look at the benches. Okay, it's you're training a big upper body group, and you still have to be able to train those muscles because you have a set of muscle, a chain of muscles on the posterior side that if they're
Yeah.
too overdeveloped, say your lats are too overdeveloped, then that can actually have a detrimental effect on your anterior chain. So
Yeah.
where sometimes the pecs will kind of balance out the lats. So if you have sometimes people overactive pecs, you can see that really get pulled forward. You can look at the lats and see what they're doing. And then sometimes if people have overactive lats and they can't actually turn a pec on, well, where is their breathing and where is their kind of anterior chain working? Is it
Gotcha.
more anterior neck? Now, I don't think that's exactly why they train it. I think it's more for strength. If you look at and go back to the reaching, if you look at a lot of sports, let's say like football, baseball, all that stuff, reaching in horizontal abduction is a big component of a lot of sports if you slow it down and watch it. So I think that's a good
Even if
way
you're
to
not going to be pushing something in a heavy load, that even if you would end up being pulling, like reaching, is still going to be important to have like a strong interior chain.
yeah. Well,
Okay.
think about it. Think if you're shooting a basketball, it's more, it depends. If you're going vertical, you still need that strength to reach away and activate those serratus lower traps.
Yeah.
Or if you're going for a chest pass, if you don't have strength, you can't put zip onto the ball. Or
But
sometimes
sorry.
I even look at like if you're a tennis player and you're reaching away to try to go hit that.
So I want to come back to this because basically what I'm understanding is that besides like if you're a football lineman, the bench press has a direct application, but reaching has its benefits, and just staying balanced between your posterior and anterior chains, and having that equal strength on both sides of it. I'm really not seeing a big benefit to directly flat benching versus like an overhead press. Like I would almost want my athletes more of overhead pressing than bench pressing. But we'll get back to that in a second. I want to
I
hear
agree with
Mike.
you.
I want you to just finish your thought. You were talking about pulling your scaps in versus worrying about pressing the bar out. And Menchie and I kind of finished the discussion on our thoughts, but we want to hear your conclusion now.
Yeah, where did you guys where did I leave off?
You're about to go over packing versus moving the shoulder blades.
Oh, right. So sorry, I kept talking and I think I just cut out and lost you guys. I literally talked for like another 2 minutes after that. So I'll
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I'll try to I will and then I looked up and I'm like, guys? And that was it was just silent.
That's great.
So basically what I was saying is when we look at the joint by joint theory, right, where we have the scapula, we don't want the scapula to be moving. And in other words, in bench press, a lot of people are going to be focused on, or let's take the downward phase, right? The eccentric phase of the bench press is essentially like a row, right? Like a horizontal row. what we're getting there is a lot of people are coaching up or telling people pull your shoulder blades together, like squeeze your shoulder blades together. But what you end up doing there is you're not really engaging, or I should say stabilizing your scapular your whole scapula on your rib cage. The scapula is a floating joint which should be in a very stable position, because just north of it you've got the glenohumeral joint, which is a mobile joint, and just south of it you've got the thoracic spine, right, which is a mobile joint. So we want the scapula to be a stable joint, because if we don't have a stable position of our scapula, then our shoulder is going to have to do stability. And we don't want our shoulder to do stability because it's supposed to be moving. So we really need to have a really good organized, scapular position as we're moving through both phases of our, our press, going into, horizontal abduction and adduction. And it's really important that you maintain a good scapular position. So like Eric was saying before, the lats have to have a lot of work involved here. And if you don't have your lats engaged as you're going through this phase of the lift, yeah, that's what's going to happen. You're going to have, a lot of, retraction, and all those rhomboids are going to get kind of tightened up in your back, and then your shoulders are going to roll back. You're going to get a lot of kind of wear and tear on the anterior compartment of that shoulder joint. So it's just a recipe for, the supraspinatus and the biceps tendon and all that nasty stuff to start grinding, through that acromion, process area. And it's just, you'll see people getting up from the bench press and they're just grabbing their shoulder. So you really need to have a good organized scapular position, which, by the way, is really hard to do if you're a very hyperkyphotic person, which a lot of people are, who are, sitting at their desk completely like hunched over. They don't have thoracic extension. If you don't have good thoracic extension, you're not going to have a good organized scapula. And if you don't have a good organized scapula, your movement's going to suffer. So.
Yeah. At Equinox, the numbers were so high, but my new gym, it's very much geared towards more of like the everyday athlete. But I feel like at Equinox back in Boston, man, maybe like 9 out of 10 people I saw had upper cross and had, just exaggerated internally rotated shoulders. It was
And
bad.
that's what comes from a lot of
Just sitting and being at a desk, right?
Yeah. And to back to your question about the athletes, and I think that's why you don't see a crazy number of sport athletes actually barbell benching. You'll walk into like a strength and conditioning facility, you'll see more dumbbell presses, dumbbell incline presses alternating. You just get a better feel, better range of motion, I even say better training effect from dumbbells on a bench press rather than a straight fixed bar.
I absolutely agree.
Single arm dumbbell bench press is like one of, I would say, if I'm going horizontal pressing outside of a push up, one of my all time favorites. I mean, think about everything that's going on in a single arm dumbbell bench press, right? You don't have a counterbalance. So if you're not engaging your core, which you have to reactively, you're going to fall off the bench. You're literally going to rotate and fall off the bench if you don't engage your core. So it forces you to do what your body is supposed to do. Plus, if you look at that from a more of a functional everyday life, like our everyday clients, our general pop people, most people aren't going and shoving or doing a horizontal pushing motion with two hands, right? If you're going through a revolving door, for example, which we all do, or we go through a door, we're pushing with one hand, which is that exact thing, right? We're planting our foot, we're pushing, and we have a rotational force put on us, but we also need to engage the core and then drive through that arm. So we create proximal stability, and then we move through the rest of the body, right? Cannon a cannon from a canoe. So it's really important that we're training exercises that are more functional carryover into the everyday living that our general pop clients are basically experiencing in everyday life. So that to me is one of the best overall exercises you can do with somebody. Plus, it gets them to like we said, we talked about proprioception. There's far more proprioception throughout the entire body, especially the core, with the dumbbell, with a single arm dumbbell especially. So
Yeah,
And I like
absolutely.
and
Shoulder stability.
I like
Go
what
ahead.
Mike went to the push up and kind of flip back to your 0 to 60 question is before I even bench press someone, I'll make sure they can move their shoulder blades on a rib cage with a push up. Because to me, there's no sense of putting someone supine and lock those shoulder blades down and then be like, okay, go on with the rest of your day. And you're just creating, dysfunction. So for me, the FMS, the trunk stability, I know we're looking at core, but I also look at like the shoulder, what they're pressing with, what they're trying to use, and start there. That's how I build up. And same thing, like I know we went over the deadlift. You're not getting to a straight barbell bench, and probably I'd count on one hand how many clients have barbell benched with me. Usually it's all dumbbell, it's all push-ups, it's all kind of variations like that.
Yeah, absolutely. The push-up is such a good testing tool, even if you don't even have to set up the FMS to do it. You can just see so much is going on where they can control their hips, squeeze their glutes to keep their hips underneath them, keep that core engaged. Can they keep their serratus on? Are they, just all upper trap? Like you said, before you go to a press. But then, like you said, Mike, like if I was progressing someone 0 to 60, I'm going push up first, and then I'm going that single arm press because I want that core to turn on, and I want that kind of that focus, as well as make up for any imbalance. Usually, it's such an easy tell. It's so obvious to people when you mention imbalances in the body, and there might be newer to lifting.
Yeah, let's talk about this too. So, something that I was just thinking about, we've all seen the people who would do the bench press and they put their feet up on the bench, right? And they do their press there. I mean, what are some reasons you've seen or people have told you why they may do that?
People say they do it to keep their core engaged more.
Yeah. Or their back hurts, right? Because they already are in extension, and then having their feet on the ground puts them into more hyperextension.
You know what I do for that real quick? I'll admit just under 5'8", and I put down plates and little platforms next to the bench when I barbell press.
Love it. I love it. I love it. But, and then even aside from that, if I was to say, let's like regress that, even to create a better position for somebody, put them on the ground, put them on the ground. It's a great position. It's extremely safe, right? The floor's not going anywhere. You can get,
Yeah, absolutely. Floor press.
yeah, you can get your hip into a flex position, feet flat on the ground. That means your pelvis. And if you're in hyperextension, your back is going to flatten out nicely. You're going to be able to engage your core better. You're going to have a better pelvis and rib cage alignment, right? So you'll have a better trunk positioning to work your press off of. It's just an overall better, more stable position. And I've gone to that plenty of times with people. Plus, what it does is it doesn't allow you to let your elbows to drop behind your body too far and go into that position where now the anterior part of your shoulder is now starting to grind away. So yeah, so when you're on your back essentially, and you don't allow your elbows to fall too far behind your torso because you're limited by the position of the floor. As you press away, right, it allows you to not go into that anterior translation of that humeral head and grind away at those tendons and ligaments. I've also seen that from upper back on a stability ball, feet flat on the ground, into what would be like an elevated kind of hip bridge position where the back is elevated on the ball. Hips are bridged up so the torso is in that horizontal position, but now you're getting posterior engagement of that posterior chain, which you don't get when you're lying on a bench. And then you can do your dumbbell press from there as well, which I really like.
I also find that with those, people say it makes it harder. It makes the bench press harder, and I totally agree with them. And I kind of like taking the feet off the floor because it kind of tells the person they can't drive through their feet and cheat through their legs. So it kind of trains them to use their upper body to move that weight. Then I can introduce them to driving through the feet, where I think people lock their feet down and they try to just drive through the legs. Where yeah, you're training a bench press, but are you optimally training that upper body reach that I want you to?
Yeah, most people are going to compensate, like you said, through the legs, and they'll actually lift their butt off the ground, really arch that back, and just put so much tension in places that shouldn't be taking the tension. Like you said, they're not really truly working just their chest. They're not really benefiting their press or bench press in general.
Now,
So yeah, I love that floor press transition or that progression.
now if you're put your feet on the bench and you go to push the weight up and you still get your butt to come off, like to me that's not beneficial. That's something I'd
Yep.
say, okay, well, now you're trying to still use your legs. And I also found another variation, sort of like the press to use is get in a glute bridge position and then do presses from there. And now you're controlling your glutes in that position, your abs, and now you're moving, upper body work. So everything's locked in and you're just training kind of like a complex movement.
I've done that.
Just describe that position one more time for people.
So you're on your back, feet are or knees are bent, feet are flat on the ground. You lift your hips up into a glute bridge position. So you're squeezing your glutes nice and tight, keeping the core on. And then just like a bench press, it's gonna feel like a decline press. You're gonna go down, back of the arms will hit the ground, and then drive back up.
I've also seen that from upper back on a stability ball, feet flat on the ground, into what would be like an elevated kind of hip bridge position where the back is elevated on the ball. Hips are bridged up so the torso is in that horizontal position, but now you're getting posterior engagement of that posterior chain, which you don't get when you're lying on a bench. And then you can do your dumbbell press from there as well, which I really like.
Love it. Love it. Nice. I love it. I love those progressions. Okay, so we got like 10 minutes left. So we talked about who the bench press is for. We didn't really touch up on weight loss, but I don't think it would be my first 10, even my top 10 exercises I would do if someone's goal was just straight weight loss. But then again, there's plenty of different variations. But back to what we're talking about, the episode is the bench press, so you'll absolutely be doing any other types of pressing motions, but specifically the bench press. What should an athlete or what should somebody be doing instead that would be more beneficial towards just having an overall strong body, whether you're trying to compete in like Tough Mudders or a specific sport? Like, would you say that the overhead press would be more applicable, or the push press?
That's a tough one. I would say no, just because I think overhead pressing is a little more shaky for people than horizontal pressing. And horizontal is more kind of comfort zone for people, unless I'm completely fine with
Okay, but what would be better for performance?
performance. For performance, I would say a landmine press. You kind of get
Okay.
a variation of a horizontal and a vertical at that angle, and you can kind of manipulate that angle. So I think for me, that's probably one of the best for performance wise that you can kind of alternate and change and not drive crazy patterns or injure people.
Awesome. Yeah, that is a really good exercise. I haven't done that in a while. You taught me that one. You showed me that one. All right, so I don't know. I feel like we covered pretty much everything. 0 to 60. Who's it best for? What would be better for a better movement to do? We talked about different progressions, regressions there. Do you guys have any other things you want to add? Anything we forgot to talk about?
I would just say, kind of like what Mike said earlier about the 3x10s, and make sure you're programming your bench press to your goals, to your needs, and not just grinding away every time you bench, high reps. And also, you'll see people go. I've heard this all the times. Oh, I start with 12 reps, and then I throw a 25 on, and I'm down to like 6 reps, and I keep throwing weight on. It's well, what are you training? Are you just trying to move as much weight as possible? And I think a lot of people are just trying to get their bench numbers up and gain size. And they have to realize you're going to either pick high reps or low reps for strength, or you can kind of do a combo and do sort of like a modified German volume training where it's like 10 reps of 3, where you're hitting strength and you're hitting volume. So for people listening, definitely alter the reps and sets, because it'll also give your body kind of recovery and break from just a hammering of straight volume on the chest.
I'm 100% with you, Eric. I'm so glad you started to mention programming because that's actually where I was going to go, which is essentially like I see so many people who are still benching. Like I worked in like one gym, for example, for like over 5 years. And I've seen people from day one when I walked in the gym benching 225 to 5 years later, still benching 225 for the same amount of reps. Are it like like what do you what's the mindset there, like what are you going for if if you haven't made any progress? And that's because here's the biggest fault that I see with people who are trying to get stronger and build a bigger stronger bench press is they go to failure on every single set, or every single time that they're lifting they go to failure. I have never I'm going to repeat this, and there's bold this right here. I have never gotten myself or any of my clients stronger by taking them to failure every single time I do the bench press with them. You always have to leave a little bit in the tank. If you're constantly going to complete failure all the time, you're putting so much more nervous system stress on your body and on your muscular system that you're never really going to build that super compensation that needs to occur in order for you to get stronger and to create a neurological response that's required in order for you to be able to lift more weight the next time you're in the gym. So, that being said, how do we do that? For me, Dan John is the master at that. If you read the book Easy Strength, there's one of the best books you can read on just, learning the basics of the very, core exercises like the deadlift, the bench press, the squat, but also cluster sets work really well. So let's say, for example, I have let's say an 8 rep max for my bench press. I'm going to take that 8 rep max and I'm going to do a cluster set of I'm going to do 2 reps, then I'm going to rest for about 30 seconds. Then I'm going to do 3 reps and I'm going to rest for 30 seconds. Then I'm going to do 5 reps and I'm going to rest for, however long, 2 minutes or whatever until the next set. And what I end up doing is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I do 10 reps at my 8 rep max with little rest in between, but never going to failure, which would be that 8 rep max in any of those three like micro sets within that set. And I end up getting a heck of a lot stronger. I did the Dan John Mass Made Simple program, which uses cluster sets on bench press. I bench pressed at 175 pounds, 295. I never broke the 300 mark, um, but man, like and I never went to failure ever. And the same thing when I train clients. So, stop thinking that, oh, I got to like get everything I can and go to maximum, intensity on every single set I do. It's a mistake if you're trying to get stronger.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I like on the topic of programming. Um, I like how you guys are talking about strength and volume. And one modality I do that I found online somewhere. I wish I remembered the guy's name who I was reading it from, but it's a 5-3-2. So you go 3 rounds and you pair it with an opposite motion. So it's your bench press, so you're going to do a pull. You might do pull ups, right, or weighted pull ups. And first round you're going 5 sets of your press, 5 sets pull ups, reps. Excuse me, 5 reps of your press, 5 reps of your pull up, then 3, then 2, and then you try to go up in weight. You do the same thing for round 2, and then you try to go up in weight again for round 3. And I feel like I've gotten stronger with it and better with it. My numbers have gone up, and I still get that volume in. But
Exactly. You could use heavy weight and still get volume.
but I'm not going till failure. You're right. That's a really good point. I'm not pushing myself. But so many people want to. I feel like it's easier to push yourself to failure with you can just do a bunch of pressing all day long, and then you can just do push-ups until you just can't even hold your body up anymore. Like people like that feeling. They feel like they put in work. Right? Like it gives them that mental feeling like they did something that day. They accomplished something that day. They might be running from their own guilt of eating a bunch or drinking a bunch, but it's easier for people to do that than say doing a bunch of back and then like doing pull-ups till failure with like feeling that same deadness in your muscle.
Yeah, yeah. It makes total sense. It's a very logical like approach to say yeah, I'm just going to go to failure. And how could this not get me results? I just crushed myself. Like, how would I not get results? But if you're focused on strength and you're focused on getting stronger, it just doesn't work to take yourself to complete nervous system failure all the time. It just doesn't. That's not how we adapt to stress properly and allow that recovery process that is actually going to get you stronger.
Yeah, you can't do it every time, but it's definitely worth doing sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's a balance. Everything's a balance. It's always a balance. Do you guys have any closing statements, any words of wisdom with the bench press, or did we just
I
kind of
think we
do
just
that?
did that.
All right, fair enough. Well, that wraps up the bench press. Feel free to write us in about anything. If you have any questions or want to hear us rant about something else, and you guys have any suggestions for, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is thinkfitnesslife, all one word, at gmail.com. Subscribe to our channel if you're on iTunes or Spotify or what have you. And next week we're going to be back at Mindset, and we'll figure it out as we go. We'll come up with something really good, though. I know we will. I trust in us.